I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, August 16th. Tonight we'll be discussing jet stream roller winds, surface level pressure, significant wave heights, and all the things that go into making surf in the North Pacific Ocean. Let's get to work. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we actually have a gale with 28-foot seas southeast of New Zealand, getting some traction on the ocean surface and possibly producing small swell, certainly for Hawaii, certainly for Tahiti, and maybe for the U.S. West Coast. At least it's a step in the right direction, and believe it or not, there's actually a couple smaller ones even before this one. So that's good news. Off in the far southeast Pacific outside of the California swell window, there's another gale with 34-foot seas, but that's of no interest to us. The main issue you see here, look at the arrows pointing south. This is the prevailing pattern for the immediate future is a big ridge here over the southeast Pacific, and a little bit of a troughing sort of pattern just east of New Zealand. All right, let's dig into the details. So let's start our tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, that is right here, a push in the jet to the north. Now, you really want more winds, but we already know that there's a gale here of some kind, so obviously this trough is supporting formation of that gale, but not very robustly. The gale we saw only was producing 29-foot seas, and what do we have here? 90 to maybe 100-knot winds. Also notice this is the 0Z run of the model from last night. NOAA's having some issues with their data feed that we connect to. They're working on it. We've gotten some communications from them, and hopefully in the next 12 hours or so they'll have it resolved. Anyway, so we have a bit of a trough here, and then also notice this ridging pattern here pushing south. So what a trough does, helps create a clockwise flow aloft. That's the hallmark of low pressure. Also does the same thing down at the surface. And if the trough is strong enough and the low is strong enough, that helps generate winds. If the winds are strong enough, that generates seas. Seas, if they're large enough, start radiating off to the north and turn into swell. Swell, if the period's long enough, eventually turns into surf in California and Hawaii. The converse is true here. When the jet is dipping to the south, that drives or forms high pressure aloft, and that just pretty much kills any chances for storm production or swell production. All right, so we move into Monday. Much the same sort of pattern, with the trough holding, actually getting a little bit more wind into it, but starting to fall south. Some other sort of something starts developing under New Zealand, more like a zonal flow. Now notice, look at this. Boom, just pushing hard south here. No hope there at all. So this is our only potential here. The ice line's like up to 62 south, something like that, which is almost, the trough's almost over ice. Maybe there's a little bit of opportunity here to get some support gale formation. This, I wouldn't even call it a trough. It's more like a zonal pattern of just wind pushing hard west to east. It rips across the South Pacific into about Wednesday night and then dies out. And then you notice the jet starts sinking south of the ice line, the Antarctic ice line. And there you come, big ridge starting to build, sweeping south into Antarctica. We're into Friday night, into Saturday, more of the same. And then we're at 180 hours out. Maybe another little trough then, but we're not holding our breath. So couple of little opportunities, and then that's it, at least from the jet stream perspective. Let's go take a look down at the surface. Here we are, surface level wind, surface level pressure, and sure enough, boom, there's a gale right there. The trough, right in that area. Winds, 45 knots over a tiny little area aimed north, but that's good. And they've actually been, in fact, we can go back a little bit and get a sense. Moving from south to northeast, that's exactly what you want. And continuing into about Sunday night, and then by Monday, the gale starts fading and dissipating. New system, though, starts building in that sort of, we'll call it a zonal trough under New Zealand. Now, the winds here are looking to almost be aimed southeast. There you go. You can see it there. Not so sure how much that's going to do for swell production. 45-knot winds on Tuesday morning, but again, pushing more towards Antarctica than towards the U.S. West Coast. Continuing into Tuesday night, broad area 45-knot winds embedded in a broad area of 40-knot winds there. The ice line down around here, so yeah, offering some good potential. And then look at that, broad area 45-knot winds. Now, if that was aimed off to the northeast, we'd be sitting very good. Unfortunately, that's not the case. If anything, it's aimed more at Antarctica again, and then that thing dies out, and that's the end of it. High pressure starts setting up. You see Fetch pushing hard south into Friday, continuing into Saturday. No hope there. And then, let's see, we're just about at the end of the model run, and nothing really obvious indicated. Let's go take a look at the wave models. Now, we're going back in time a little bit. This is a week ago, Saturday, the 8th of August. So there was a little gale under New Zealand, 32-foot seas. 33.1-foot seas to be precise, but over a very tiny area, barely lifting northeast at all. And then a secondary fetch built from that on Sunday and sort of just nudged off to the east a little and died. The short of it is, swell from this system has already hit Hawaii. It's bound for California. You can actually, if you go look at the buoys, there's some little tiny energy, like 18, 19-second energy showing down in Southern California and in Northern California this evening. Swell from that ought to be hitting in earnest by tomorrow, Monday, and continue for a couple days so there's the first pulse from back. Let's go back here and take a look. From that, and you go, that's hardly anything. And yeah, I don't expect much of a swell. Then the second little pulse will add another little blip of energy to that. So give us some waves through the first part of the week. And then there was this other system. Now the models had a bit of a hiccup here and we lost some data. But still, another little pulse of swell is expected from that, maybe more towards California. You notice, yeah, seas were big there for a second, 40 foot, but all aimed right at Antarctica. So no support there. And then another system tried to develop on Friday, more of a teaser, 28-foot seas. I mean, Hawaii and Tahiti certainly will get some surf from this. California, it's from there, it's just eyeballing it. It's like 6,600 nautical miles away, and that's probably too far to get more than like 15-second period background energy, something like that. And so maybe not a whole lot from that. And then now the current system, which is better positioned on Sunday, lifting north with 28-foot seas. Let's go take a look at the forecast now. Here we are. 30-foot seas are forecast in a couple hours, up to barely 32-foot seas this evening. And then even another little pulse. Mike, was that like one grib cell of 30-foot seas and then fading out. So yes, some swell from that. So that if this is happening on, let's say, Monday, so that would be not this coming Wednesday, but like Wednesday in California, like Wednesday a week from now. So pretty good little run of small southern hemi surf is expected. And then there's this last one pulse forecast starting Tuesday, pushing its way but across the Pacific, but just aligned completely to the east. 40-foot seas, but most of this fetch was aimed southeast. I really don't see how you can get a swell direction that's pushing east, so we're not too excited about this, even though it looks pretty impressive on the charts. Then after that, you'll see everything just pushing hard to the south and not anything aimed up in the California swell window. All right, let's move on. Next up, Windswell. All right, so here we are, current situation. We'll get this to Sunday. Here we are. Really, no Windswell. There was really nothing yesterday. Oh, maybe some waist-high mush burgers up in Northern California at the very best spots in terms of wind swell. But other than that, nothing pushing into Hawaii. A rather calm wind pattern indeed. And Monday, no real change. We get into Tuesday. Also, keep your eyes here. There's a little bit of something. The models have been consistently hinting at something in the Northern Gulf. Whether it actually produces any surf, very unlikely given the early time in the season and just the way the pattern's setting up this year. Anyway, Tuesday night, at least some fetch starts building over Northern California, Central California, 20, 25 knots. Maybe some developing wind swell, but probably not quite yet. More focused in Central California than Northern California. More of the same on Wednesday. Notice the low here. It's kind of cutting the legs out of this high pressure that's driving the fetch down the California coast. But there we go, 30-knot winds up there. We'll believe it when we see it. But as we get into Friday, supposedly this fetch is supposed to get a little bit more organized. Also notice some sort of a tropical system. If this were to happen, we're just going to go back and look here. So that's in the Southern Cal swell window right there. Also looks like maybe a moisture plume pushing off to the north. If that happens, another round of potential for tropical rain even up into Northern California, maybe. Anyway, we get into Saturday, Sunday. North winds again along the California coast. Good for some maybe minimal wind swell, but nothing super organized, and that's the end of that. Okay, rainfall potential for California in the Sierra, but we're also going to take a little diversion here. Sunday morning, Northern California actually had rain, like, third of an inch, something like that in some places in Northern California, and a good amount of lightning, and bit of a show. Was kind of surprising and fun. Also, this evening, supposedly showers in the Sierra. If you're hiking Pacific Crest Trail, John Muir Trail, be on the lookout for that. But you're probably not watching this video if you're doing that, and I wouldn't be either. Anyway, Monday night, lesser odds, still some potential for thunderstorms in the Sierra, and even Tuesday night. But then at some point, there we go, it starts drying out, not as pronounced as we get later in the week. Watching this system up in the Gulf here. Actually, let's see how far south that rain makes it. Just into Oregon, it looks like. Yeah, North Oregon at that. All right, and then nothing really up in the mountains after, what was it, Tuesday night, something like that. You get the idea. So mainly Sunday night, Monday night, and then a little bit Tuesday night, and then dry in the Sierra. Then, as you know, we're not really into temperatures. I mean, that's not like surf related, but looking at the freeze level, red here, we'll pull this over so you can see this. So anything that's red is liquid precipitation, sleet is gray, there we go. If there was precipitation, this is just actual potential temperature-wise. So what we're saying is above freezing temperatures, above 30, basically 35 degrees, from 14,000 feet and down. And we already know it's going to be a scorcher. So at higher elevations, though, it's supposed to be not too bad. At 10,000 feet, we looked, and it was, lows in the 51, 52 range and high in the 70s during the day. So not horrible for hiking, but you don't want to get much below about 8,000 feet. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden-Julian oscillation and El Nino or La Nina? Well, we all know where we're heading. So as usual, we'll start looking for the active phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation, the MJO. The MJO is this periodic weather oscillation that traverses the planet on the equator, moving from west to east, going the whole way around the planet. Two phases, active phase, and the active phase is basically like a low pressure system. It produces clouds, rain, weather, wherever it is, and it just sort of, in a bit by like 1,000, 1,500 nautical mile area it affects. But when it pushes through the Pacific, and if it's strong enough, the active phase can impart energy to the jet stream, which feeds the storm track, which then helps produce storms, and then, of course, that can produce swell. When in the inactive phase, it does the exact opposite. It's like a big high-pressure system. It locks things down. The jet starts moving hard poleward. You get no good troughs and not good support for storm development. All right, so we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. what we would want to see is slackenings of trades or westerly anomalies in the West Pacific. Right, so we're looking at the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator, used for monitoring El Nino, but they also have wind sensors on them. We're just looking at the arrows. The arrows are a 5-day average of what the winds are doing. Strong, look at the size of the arrows. Strong out of the east over the East Pacific, over the Central Pacific, and then weaker in what we call the Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific. From 135 east to 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Draw a box in your mind over this area. When the active phase is there, and if it's strong enough, not only does it impart energy to the jet stream and feed the storm track and all that stuff, it can also reverse trade winds, and if those trades are strong enough and last long enough, can produce a Kelvin wave, which effectively takes warm water here, starts pushing it off to the east. All right. But it's not the absolute winds we're interested in. Anomalies. Are these winds today stronger or weaker than normal for this time of year? Well, we're looking at the arrows here and we see maybe just a hair bit stronger out of the east. But when you get into the Central Pacific, there's no real arrows, so it's pretty much neutral. In the Kelvin wave generation area, little tiny westerly, blip there. So say basically normal winds for most of the Pacific. That's good news. What has the trend been the past 5 days? Okay, so this is a little bit hard to read, but there's South America, Central America, Mexico, the equator, 0 degrees right there. Okay, and underneath there's the Philippines, there's New Guinea right there. So the Kelvin wave generation area is right in that area, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So we see easterly anomalies, that's the blues, for the most part in control on the 10th of August. Giving up strength as we get into the 12th, and on the 13th of August, we almost had a neutral to light west wind pattern, and that continued into the 14th. So that is indications of perhaps a building active phase of the MJO, and that would be kind of good. All right, so what is the forecast? All right, this is the whole planet on one chart. This is the GFS model. So how do you read this? 180. That is the date line, right up the middle of the chart. The Pacific Ocean goes from about 135 east from here over to about 80 west. Over here would be Ecuador. This is just on the equator. Kelvin wave generation area from here to about here. So you just go right up here in your mind's eye, this sector of the chart. The blues are easterly anomalies. That would be the inactive phase of the MJO. You can see back in July and early August, very strong inactive phase of the MJO, nuking east trades. And then we get to about 3 days ago, and that started falling apart. And then we had just this tiny little area of westerly anomalies starting to develop, the yellows. And we saw that on the previous chart, like since maybe the 10th, that said. That maybe is a little bit generous. But either way, past couple of days, light westerly anomalies. Now notice westerly anomalies building in the far East Pacific, east of the date line. But it's really the Kelvin wave generation area right in here. If that's where your westerly anomalies are, that's how you get good energy imparted to the jet. And we're seeing not a whole lot of that, and in another 2 days it's supposed to be gone, and it looks like the easterly anomalies start building again. So if this looks like right here, the active phase of the MJO. So this is our window for swell production. And sure enough, I mean, things have kind of woken up, right? Starting, what was that, a week ago? We started seeing tiny little, weak little gales, right? Developing. That's supposed to go for another day or 2 or 3, and then things start falling apart, and that tracks very well with what we're seeing here. Let's go look a little further out. So the MJO is comprised of not just changes in the trades, but also precipitation, right? It's like a low-pressure system. So here's the whole planet again. South America there, Central America, Africa there, Indian Ocean here. Kelvin wave generation area right around in there. The yellows are areas not favorable for precipitation. High pressure, consider that the inactive phase of the MJO. The blues are roughly where the active phase would be. So you see inactive phase in control of the Kelvin wave generation area today. 5 days from now, building inactive phase. 10 days from now, building more, and then pretty much holding 15 days from now. So the next 2 weeks, it's again moving downhill relative to storm production. Now, this is per the statistic model. The dynamic model, thank goodness, is actually up and running again. It was messed up there for a week or two, and it's basically saying the exact same thing, only, let's see if we can get the two of them here in the same, only the dynamic suggests the inactive phase to be stronger than the statistic model 2 weeks from now. So either way, things aren't looking good. The suggestion is if there's surf, you better get it now, because this is not to say there won't be surf, but statistically speaking, the odds are not favorable for significant storm development once the inactive phase gets its toe in the door. Then relative strength of the MJO. So this is this phase diagram chart. It's kind of a funky chart, but it is another way to look at the active phase of the MJO. All right, so this chart, the circle in the middle, assume that's the North Pole, and you're looking down on it from on top of our planet, and out around the edges are the equator. The MJO, just both active and inactive, move from west to east from the Indian Ocean, over the maritime continent, over the West Pacific, East Pacific, under the United States, like across the Gulf of Mexico, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is today, and the further out away from this circle it is, the stronger it is. So a very weak active phase of the MJO, per the statistic model. The forecast over the next 15 days is for the active phase to push into, we'll say, the Indian Ocean and be exceedingly weak. The GFS dynamic model suggests somewhat of the same thing, with the active phase moving into the Atlantic and getting pretty strong. When is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about a week from now, something like that. The implications here are, and if you've been following what's going on in the Atlantic, sea surface temperatures are pretty far above normal. We're in sort of a La Nina-ish like pattern. There's not a whole lot of shear. And if you get the active phase moving over the Atlantic, any tropical system that develops, this is like throwing gas on a fire. So this will be an interesting time to watch and see. And even then, the active phase, it crashes, but it hangs over what they call the main development region, the MDR in the Atlantic, which is what we used to call the Cape Verde Storm Corridor. So this will be interesting to see how this plays out. All right, and yet another model. This is the CFS model, and this is, okay, the whole planet on one chart, date line right up the middle, Kelvin wave generation area from there to about there, and this is where we are today. The heavy contour, solid contour, is the active phase of the MJO, and no big surprise, active phase of the MJO is over the Kelvin wave generation area today, and looking halfway decent. The interesting part is you can see the reds are westerly anomalies, the blues easterly anomalies. We want westerly anomalies. They're what push energy up into the jet stream. You see they're kind of getting stomped on. This red dotted line is an equatorial Rossby wave, and we're not even sure that's completely the culprit here. It could just as easily be sort of the La Nina high pressure bias thing that's going on in this area. But you see as the Kelvin wave, as the active phase of the MJO starts moving past the Kelvin wave generation area and out of this area where there's a high pressured bias, boom, it just explodes in the East Pacific and then moving into the Atlantic about a week and a half out, something like that. So, and the Atlantic, let's see, Florida's about 80 west, so right about there, something like that. So this would be a good window here for tropical development in the East Pacific if temperatures cooperate and blah, blah, blah. Most of the energy we think is in the Atlantic, though. But we did notice, you saw it on the previous runs of the models, that there was a bit of a tropical cyclone forecast south of Southern California. This is probably going to be feeding into that. Anyway, so we're good for about a week in the Pacific at best, and then the easterly anomaly pattern starts setting up in the Kelvin wave generation area. Dotted black contour here, inactive phase of the MJO takes over, and it's all downhill from there. So this is all consistent with what we've been seeing on the previous models. Here's the 40-day upper level model, and this runs about a week ahead of what's going on down at the surface. But anyway, South America, Central America there, New Guinea there. Kelvin wave generation area right around in there. The greens area is favorable for precipitation. Remember, this is about a week ahead, so East Pacific in the target. As the inactive phase starts moving in, what is that, the 26th of August, something like that, then pretty much taking over the Pacific. Now, this suggests that this inactive phase is not supposed to be particularly organized or coherent, but still it takes over the whole of the Pacific through the end of the model run at the end of September. So that is not really conducive to storm or swell development. Some sort of active phase trying to move into the West Pacific at the end of the model run. And then finally, the 3-month model. Now this one, same deal, whole planet one chart, Kelvin wave generation area from there, goes straight up to there. Just eyeballing this, you go, hey, that looks pretty good there, whatever that is. Oh, November, October. And so we are kind of keeping our eyes on this because the model has been consistently hitting it. So the yellows and reds are westerly anomalies. Sort of looks like some big active phase of the MJO or something going on here. But in the meantime, look at the easterly anomalies here. This is all in the Kelvin wave generation area, moving into the East Pacific, kind of taking it over. Let's overlay the MJO. Here we go. All right, so here is our active phase of the MJO today, and the forecast is moving up. This is past history down here. Notice the exceedingly weak MJO pattern, and then starting about a week from now, the MJO is supposed to theoretically wake up, and that in and of itself gives us a little bit of hope because no MJO, even if temperatures are warm, there's just not a lot of energy in the atmosphere. Just like last winter, it was kind of a weak MJO pattern, very low, not energetic activity. But this gives us some hope that even if you have these big yings and yangs between the inactive phase and active phase, that means there's a swing in the atmosphere, and that'll help kick up some storms, theoretically. All right, so anyway, today, weak active phase of the MJO in control. You see this sort of a mixed east-west anomaly, wind anomaly pattern in the Kelvin wave generation area, and then the East Pacific firing up about, over the next week or so. But then after that, strong inactive phase of the MJO starting August 24th and going into about mid-September, something like that. East anomalies in control. Good for Windswell, probably not for anything else. But then things get very interesting as we get into, we'll say, first week of September. Strong active phase of the MJO is forecast. West anomalies building and filling the Kelvin wave generation area, not particularly firmly, but way better than anything we've had for, well, you can look back there, for a couple of months. So there is some hope there. And even after that, there's an inactive phase of the MJO. Oh, the other thing to notice here, too, is the inactive phase starts like September 12th, let's say. Doesn't even fully move out of the Kelvin wave generation area till November 12th. So what is that, 2 months? So this is kind of interesting. The model's been consistently hinting at this. We're not quite sure why it says this thing's supposed to run so long, but if it does, we'll take it. That would be good news for us. All right, then the low pass filter. There's even one better piece of news here. So this is sort of a bias. We're looking at this dotted contour here and this solid contour here. And notice how even in the spring, but this is really last winter, we had the solid contour, which is a low pressure bias, a bias in the Pacific over the dateline towards low pressure. That would be like El Nino, right? And then the opposite of that, the dotted contour, is a bias towards high pressure. And that suggests the development of La Nina, with a second contour building September 9th. But the past couple of days, this model's been hinting that that second contour only makes it till about mid-November. And also notice this low-pressure bias that is developing now in the Indian Ocean is to start easing off to the east, maybe making some headway into the far west Pacific would be right around there in November. That's probably too much to hope for, and it's definitely a reach because the core of this energy is over the maritime continent. But maybe that would suggest that we for sure, NOAA has officially declared or said the odds for La Nina development this winter are pretty good. But this sort of hints that, yeah, that's going to happen. I mean, all the signs are there. If you've been following us every week, you know what's going on. But maybe it won't be as bad as expected. and maybe it won't last as long as expected either. This is holding a glimmer of hope out, but I mean, again, we're looking 3 months out on a model. Don't believe that, but this model has seemed to do a reasonable job of at least getting a hint of what's coming in the future. So more to follow on that front. All right, so we think we're moving towards La Nina. There's more to El Nino and La Nina than just the atmosphere and the MJO. There's an oceanic component. First place we look, subsurface ocean temperatures. This is the far west Pacific here, far east Pacific here. These are the anchor lines on the TAO buoy array, those buoys that are strung across the equator. The X's are sensors on those buoys. They collect data, send it up to a supercomputer in Maryland or somewhere up north, and they use a model to sort of fill in the gaps, and you get a profile of what the subsurface temperatures look like in centigrade. Warm water, 29 degrees centigrade in the West Pacific, 28 degree isotherm at 175 west. It was actually, I think, over at 170 last week. So this sort of hints that warm water is moving not to the east, but to the west. The 24 degree isotherm, it was somewhere around here, 115 last week. It's at 120, probably backtracking a little bit. Okay, so it's sort of, if you were in El Nino, there'd be a lot more warm water, a lot thicker thermocline warm water over here. When you get into La Nina, when the trades start nuking, it kind of just pushes all the warm water off to the west. Cold water starts upwelling to the surface here off of Ecuador in that area. So let's go take a look at anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Okay, well, we don't have the temperatures in the far west Pacific are about 0 degrees difference from normal, 1 degree right there. And in the far east Pacific, they're about normal. But in the central Pacific, -1, -2, -3, almost -4 degrees centigrade. And that's, multiply that almost by 2 to get the Fahrenheit, 1.8. So we'll say, 5.5 degrees below normal here. And upwelling to the surface from, where is that? That's right there, 130 west, so a little bit southwest of California, out to effectively the date line. So that's pretty cold. No sign of Kelvin waves. That'd be warm water tracking from west to east. And no surprise there, because there's been no active phases of the MJO in the past months of any magnitude with any westerly anomalies associated with it. So no big surprise there. We look at another model, another view of the same data, and it's telling us the same thing, if not even a little bit worse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3 to 4 degrees below normal here, all upwelling to the surface. The warm patch here, far smaller in this depiction than what we saw in the other one. All warm water, hold up in the far west Pacific. No surprise. Trades are blowing. No sign of the active phase of the MJO. A quick look at sea height anomalies. These are not temperatures. This is the height of the ocean. Is it above normal or below normal? You can see right here. Oh, sorry. Here's the equator. Here's the date line. That's South America there. Central America. You get the idea. Hawaii right there. So south of Hawaii. You get the idea. So we saw a lot of cooling here off of Ecuador and Peru earlier when this cool pattern started emerging, but that has moderated some. And the focus now seems to be upwelling in the central Pacific. The more, if we're moving into a La Nina, the further the cold water is away from being south of California, the better, because that's where high pressure sets up. So if this is here, your high pressure system this winter would be north of there. If this can nudge even further off to the west, it might give the opportunity for the jet stream to do one of these numbers over the high and then push into California, at least afford us a modicum of potential for precipitation. Right now, when it was the cold, when the negative anomalies were here and even here, that pretty much suggests a major blocking pattern into California for this winter. then sort of a historical montage or a time-lapse of what has been going on. So this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Oranges and yellows are warmer than normal temps. You can see Kelvin wave, this was September of 2019, pushing across the Pacific. The final sort of a double pulse Kelvin wave, warm water pushing from west to east, December, January, February, March, and then boom, this big like upwelling event that occurred starting in mid-April and has continued on even to this day, but weakening. And now you see this new pool of coolings or upwelling starting to develop in August, centered south of Hawaii, roughly, and maybe a hair bit east of there. So it's interesting to see how this evolves. You know, the further west, the better is our thought if we're going to have an upwelling event. We'll get more into this here in a second. Okay, so much for subsurface temperatures. Let's go take a look at the surface temperature anomalies. South America there, Peru, moving out along the equator. You can see there's been cold water off of Peru and Ecuador, but this is steadily losing ground, and the new evolving cool pool seems to be out here. Where's Hawaii? Right there. Southeast of Hawaii. We want to see this fade as much as possible. And if you're going to do a La Nina thing, do it like here. It'd be a Modoki La Nina, if you will. They have these Modoki El Niños, which are El Niños that are westward displaced. If we were to get a La Nina that was westward displaced, that would be better than a full-on raging La Nina smashing up along the southeast coast, because at least it gives us an opportunity for precipitation in California. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. You can actually see as the reds are areas warming. You see temperatures warming here off of Ecuador. This is the equator right along here, 0, right? But you see the cooling pattern more out here, not radical cooling, but cooling nonetheless south of Hawaii. It's just a 7-day trend. And then the backed off view again. I mean, the cool pull off of Peru, not particularly weaker than the one south of Hawaii, but this one seems to be getting most of the energy for the moment. And again, that subsurface cool pool down there that's upwelling to the surface, that's what's driving all this here. It doesn't appear, at least for the moment, that it's going to push into Peru, but that could change too. We're still pretty early in this event. Sea surface temperature trend, the index. This is in the Nino 1.2 region. This is the area right there by Ecuador, Peru, and that. You see temperatures since May have been steadily falling downward. Today actually bouncing back a little bit, but still quite cold, minus 1.627 degrees below normal, and kind of just bouncing around there since, we'll say, mid-July, something like that. Now the Nino 3.4 region, this is further west. This is like from south of California out to the date line. Temperatures steadily falling there today at minus 0.424 degrees. And this is all attributable to that cool pool that's upwelling in the Central Pacific, right in the heart of the 3.4, the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. And then the final component of the ENSO cycle, the El Nino, La Nina cycle, is the atmosphere, of course, right? The ocean. So the hallmark of the El Nino cycle is the coupling of the ocean with the atmosphere. The ocean gets cold, but if the atmosphere doesn't respond to it, then you just sort of sit in this like a neutral type pattern. And that appears to be what's going on, at least for the moment. It takes a long time for the ocean to start influencing the atmosphere. Once it does, and once they couple, it takes equally as long to get it once they're coupled, it takes equally as long for them to uncouple. So let's go look at this. The Southern Oscillation Index. It's the difference in pressure between Tahiti and Darwin, Australia. When the index is negative, minus 1.94 today, that suggests pressure is lower over Tahiti. All right, but we kind of look back and see, well, what's been going on? Well, there was plus 22, 25, and you just sort of eyeball it and you go, the trend has definitely been positive. And 30-day average here, that's rather than eyeball it, you can just look, okay, today the value is positive 4.73. So if you're in the active phase of the MJO, this would be negative. If you're in the inactive phase, this would be positive. What's the value been? Oh, we're looking here. It's been hovering around 3 to 4 for 2 weeks now. 90-day average. Takes you 90 days to get into it, so this is certainly a lagging indicator. Today's value minus 0.50, so about as close to dead neutral as you're going to get. Neither El Nino nor La Nina. But where were we? Now, a month ago, minus 1.3, so it's rising slowly, but not dramatically so. Here the SOI is graphed out, and you can see back 2018 we were kind of in a La Nina. Then last year we started falling towards what we thought was an El Nino, but the MJO was just real. We got one good pulse here in October of the active phase of the MJO, and then since then the trend has been steadily upward. You can see it there, and that is only continuing today, suggesting we're definitely moving not into La Nina according to this, though I suspect we are, but at least a good solid neutral. And then finally, sea surface temperature forecast for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. All right, this hasn't changed. I mean, it says August 17th, but there's been literally no change to this thing for weeks. Beginning to wonder if there isn't something wrong with the model. It said in July 1st, sea surface temperatures in the official El Nino monitoring region were supposed to be plummeting, and by now we're supposed to be down at like minus 0.7. We're neutral today, something like that. Not, weekly cold. I'm 0.4. So this is probably overstated by 2 times. Anyway, the forecast calls for temperatures getting down to about minus 1.1 degrees as we get into October, November, early December, and then starting to moderate and neutral as we get into next spring. This definitely would be a major La Nina if it were to happen, but we think we're going to get about half that, maybe down at minus 0.7 or 0.8, which is still La Nina, but not super strong. So that's kind of the forecast. But for now, there's small swell finally starting to hit California, a little bit of energy into Hawaii. That's supposed to continue for a week, maybe even a little bit more, a week and a half, something like that. So make the most of it. Definitely set your sights low. Do not expect big, powerful surf. It's just something to ride. There'll be windswell in Northern California as we get later in the week. But again, even that won't be great. But there'll be surf. Make the most of it. Summer's here. It's a little bit warm out. So better enjoy the water, but try not to get too close to people. Longer term, it looks like we're still moving towards some sort of La Nina. How strong, how intense, whether it will be east-focused or westward displaced. We're hoping westward displaced, but we're not betting on it at this point in time. So we just got to suck it up for this winter. Precip for California, probably not great this winter either. Maybe we'll get lucky, but again, we're not betting on that. But then hopefully beyond that, we'll get this out of the way, and then we'll be back in business. All right, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the subscribe button. We'll send you an email when we post the videos. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. Go visit us at stormsurf.com. That's where all this information comes from. You can follow along weekly and then test your skills with the video next week. Comments, always welcome. Questions, post them up. Let's know. We can have a discussion about it there. All right, so thanks for watching. We'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.